out some objects before you get into some of the finer details. Let's look at this one. Hello text, goodbye text. Cool, huh? It's quick, it's easy, it's super awesome, and goodbye man. This is one of those Photoshop magic things where you're just like, how, why? It's so good. Let's learn how to do it now in Adobe Photoshop. First thing is let's open up a bunch of images. Let's go to File, Open, and in your exercise files, we're now in this 09 retouching folder. I want you to open up all 4 of these. So we've got Content Aware Fill 1, 2, 3, and 4. All right, we're gonna start with kind of like easy to hard. So we're gonna start with this 01 from Molvestida magazine. Okay, we looked at this earlier on when we're doing vibrance. Let's say the clients come back and said, actually, I want these 3 things removed. Now, first of all, we need to select them. And in this case, this is one of the few times I use the lasso tool. I showed you it earlier on. This is one of the times I use it a lot, okay, when I'm trying to remove things. Click and hold down, and we'll just use the, instead of the regular lasso tool, we're gonna use the polygonal one. Polygonal, it's one of those. And with this one, we click once, click again. You just kind of work your way around, clicking once. I'm not holding anything down. I'm just kind of working my way around this, including the shadow, okay, and being back here. You can be really vague with the selections with this tool. It's pretty amazing. And let's go to Edit, and we'll go to Fill. Now this thing is called Content Aware Fill, and it's hidden in Fill, and it's amazing. And so many people don't discover it because it's kind of hiding in here. Click on Fill. We've used black, white, so yours might need to be changed to Content Aware. Then click OK, kick back, relax, and magic. Cool, huh? I'm gonna go to Select, Deselect, and it's done a pretty amazing job. There's a tiny bit of something in there, but man, it's hard to tell. Let's do it again for the lipstick. Okay, so I'm gonna click once, click again. I'm gonna go around, just clicking around the outside. Edit Fill. Content Aware, give it a click. Magic. I do love that. Such an easy trick to show people. Deselect. Now it works really, really well with small things in a larger picture. If I try and remove this bag, it's gonna freak out. I'll show you how much it's gonna freak out. Let's go around the edges. I'm just clicking once. Gives it a good go. Like it's pretty amazing how much of a go it gives it. Okay, let's go to Edit, Fill, Content Aware, click OK, and pretty good. Okay, it's a good starting point at least. You can start to see all the kind of weirdness going on. Depending on the quality of your video, you might be on a really like slow internet connection. You might not see it and it might look perfect. But trust me, it's a little bit manky, a little bit. All right, let's move on to another one. So Content Aware Fill 2. This one's not particularly harder. We're going to use just the rectangle marquee tool here because it's a nice, easy part. It could be graffiti on a wall. Now this is gonna work mainly because it's an uneven wall. If it was a perfectly well laid wall with no kind of defects over it, it might look not as good. Let's go to Edit, let's go to Fill, and get ready, get steady, go. Cool, huh? Now deselect, it kind of fudges the edges. Like there is no way of telling where the defects are in this wall because the wall's so forgiving. Let's look at some less forgiving work under Content Aware Fill 3. This one here has too many like geometric shapes and there's too many kind of differences here. Those first 2 examples were nice ones where the background was all consistently the same texture. This one here is going to be okay. I'm going to go back to my lasso tool. I'm going to zoom in. Now this is where you might spend a little bit more time being closer because the background is so different. So I'm going to go around them and spend a little bit more time clicking. I'll get the editor to speed this up. All right, we're back. That took me all of about a minute. So we're going to go to Edit, Fill, and go. Content Aware Fill, and go again. Let's hit Deselect. It's pretty good. You know, there's some obvious defects there, but at a glance, there's like, you can see the edge of that's not great, but man, it's pretty close. There's a shadow that we probably need to remove off him. But in all honesty, other than now grabbing the rectangle tool and kind of grabbing bits, copying and pasting them, moving them over with the move tool and trying to like maybe feather the edges, that's where I go to next. And that's the only real other way. So it's done a pretty neat job. Now, before I move on to the next bit, I just want to show you, like, we haven't used the lasso tool very much and you might be finding it quite problematic. So I'm going to move the person back in and I'm going to show you a couple of things you might run into with the lasso tool. Okay, so if you are finding this polygonal lasso tool super hard to use, just go to this lasso tool, the first one, just click hold and you can just drag around it if you've got a steady enough hand. Okay, that'll work fine. But if you do really want to master this polygonal, I'm gonna stop saying it now, the one with the straight edges. Okay, watch this. If I click once, and then sometimes if I get close to the edges, it really wants to do this. I'll just show you because when I teach people, this happens all the time. They kind of end up in no man's land. They're like, oh man, how do I get back? The trick is once you've finished, like, well, got lost, hit escape on the keyboard. That's your like, I'm giving up, I'm gonna start again button. Okay, escape on the keyboard. Okay, the other thing is that if you do go all the way around, I'm cheating here by doing it in nice big chunks. And you get back here and you're like, it won't finish. Why can't I find the end? What you can do is just double click and it will find the end and join it up for you. So those are the two things you might run into when you're using that tool. You can use any tool. You can use the quick mask selection and go into that select and mask and expand it. That could be a good way of doing it, but I don't think you're going to get much better results. Now this last example here, 04, this has the same problem as the last one. I want you to practice on this one though. Go around the edges with a selection tool, any tool you like, see if you can get rid of this young man. He's ruining our shot. How dare he get in there? All right, that's gonna be it for content aware fill. I love this tool. And when I'm retouching and kind of removing things, it's a really easy way to get rid of the kind of first bulk stuff. You might have a great image, except for that one thing that got in the shot. It might be something that you left there or rubbish on the ground. Content aware fill is a nice, quick and easy way to retouch. All right, I will see you in the next retouching video. And off to see the before and after. We're just doing subtle adjustments. We can go the full Monty and kind of go full blown, I've been here in Photoshop retouching mode. We'll show you both. You'll also see we do more than just the eyes as well. I kind of go off on a bit of a tangent and show you how to use the exact same tools that we use for the eyes to work with, say, like the hair and the jawline. All right, let's jump into it now. Let's open up our image. Let's go to File, let's go to Open. And in your retouching file, we're gonna use Eyes 01. First thing to do is we need to duplicate this layer because we want to be able to go back to it later on and see what the original looked like. So right click it, say duplicate layer. I'm going to call this one retouch. Now we'll do the whites of the eyes first and we use it. I'm zooming a little bit. We're going to use the dodge tool. So the dodge tool, depending on what last tool you use, it's in this little group here. It's this little paddle thing here. Okay, with it selected, up the top here, we used this a little earlier when we did our paint drips, okay, and midtones work great then. In this case, because we're working on the whites of the eyes or the highlights in the eyes, we want to be on highlights. Now exposure, we're going to have it 50. Yours is probably set like that by default. Brush size, something appropriate in the eye here. I've got 70 and I've made sure my brush hardness is down at 0. Now the protect tones is optional. It works fine with it on in this case. But if you're working, you're finding it's making the eyes kind of really gray, you might try turning that off. And all we need to do, make sure we're on our retouch layer and click, hold, and kind of drag over a little bit. Now, I've kept mine quite high at 50 so that you can kind of see what I'm doing. I'm just kind of little bits. Now, that is way too high. What I mean by that is it's just kind of coming on real strong. I leave it at 50 just so that you can see what I'm doing. When I'm actually doing it, I'm undoing, I'm stepping backwards. Okay, I'll often be at something like 20% and build it up slowly. But it's a little hard to see when you're kind of just working it up slowly. So maybe a slightly smaller brush, 60. Clicking, dragging, clicking. I want the whites of the eyes. I want the reflections on the eyes to be a bit brighter as well. And don't worry if you go a bit too far. I think I've gone a little bit too far there. A little bit too far there. Crank that up. Because what we'll do is, let's zoom back a little bit, is because it's on its own layer, at the end when we finish this, we're going to turn down the opacity. Watch this, I turn it right down. You just find this kind of happy medium of like believability versus overcooked Photoshopness. So it's okay to be a little bit overcooked because you can just lower this opacity, showing the layer underneath. I'm going to zoom out. I'm going to tap the eyeball on, eyeball off. So that's a kind of how to fix the whites of the eyes. I feel like I've gone a little bit too far over here. So that's the dodge tool. Okay, lightens things up. I'm going to have the opacity back at 100% for the moment. And let's grab the burn tool, which darkens things. We've used it for shadows in the past. It's really handy for a couple of things when you're retouching. One is fix up eyebrows. It's not fixing them up and just kind of like giving them an extra bit of fullness. You can also use it to kind of enhance cheekbones. So I've got mine on midtones. I've got the exposure up probably too high because I'm going to turn it down to like 20%. You can see up there. And I'm just going to kind of tweak in here. Not too much, just to enhance the kind of jawline. On, off. It's not particularly subtle, but you get what I mean, right? So dodging kind of lifts the eyes, and the burn tool kind of helps you fill in a bit of the moodiness. We'll lower down the overall opacity at the end. One last thing I'll do when I'm doing this type of thing is to play with the saturation. And it's a mixture of desaturating and saturating. What I mean by that is this thing here called the sponge tool. So we've used dodge, burn, we'll use the sponge tool. And by default, I think it's set to desaturate. And that can be really handy. I'm gonna go down here. It's probably set a little high at 50%, but I guess I just wanna show you how it's working. There's some colors, kind of yellow. I can double click that a couple of times. It's a little hard to see, okay? But it just kind of removes some of that kind of yellowiness that can come through on the eye. So that's desaturation. What I use a lot more of is the saturation. Okay, and I'm gonna pick a slightly big brush size and I'm gonna saturate the eyes just a little bit. I'm just clicking once or twice, 1, 2, 3, 4 times even. Okay, so there's just a little bit more of the exact same color in there, just a little bit more of it. Same with the hair. I'm gonna pick a nice big paintbrush, way bigger, using my square brackets. Okay, and I'm just gonna click, hold, and drag across the hair a little bit. It's hard to know how much it's doing. Smaller for across here, a bit bigger in here. So gone too far, that's okay, because we're gonna lower the opacity, but can you see what I mean by the hair just getting a little bit richer? And I'm also going like, I guess, 50% over because I know I'm gonna tone down the opacity, which I've said 1,000 times already, but I don't want you judging my retouching, not yet anyway. Okay, now I'm gonna lower this opacity and just kind of find a happy blend between 0 and 100. 100 too much, 0 nothing, and just find this kind of realistic but happy medium. Mine feels about 40%. It really depends on what you're going for. If you're going full glam, then you might crank it up to like 200%. Start using the burn tool to put in mascara, really enhance that jawline. But I guess I'm trying to go for believability. It's hard when you're a retoucher because for you to do your job really well, people need to not know that you had anything to do with it. Like there's no job recognition. You're meant to, if people think, oh great, that's being photoshopped, you've done a bad job. All right, so we use the dodge tool to lighten parts, we use the burn tool to darken parts, and we use the sponge tool to both desaturate the eyes and saturate the things we want colored. You could do the same for the lips. You could desaturate that background there to kind of enhance the model, to bring the model forward. What I want you to do is to practice your skills. So go to File, Open. Okay, and there's one in here called Eyes 02. I want you to do the same thing here. Dodging, burning, and using the sponge tool. But don't forget, before you get started, is duplicating that layer so that you can turn it back later on. Here might also be a good time to just touch up. There's a couple of spots on the skin using the spot healing brush that we learned earlier on. All right, let's get into the next video where we look at teeth in particular. If you are working on this one, you start working on the teeth and it does something weird, goes gray or yellow, I'm going to show you some tricks for that in the next video. See you over there.